The coverage of news stories that involve some kind of non-consensual sexual activity can be a very touchy subject for many parties involved. I will be discussing the ethical issues that can arise by using specific terms, such as sexual assault and rape, to report a case like this. During my analysis of the subject matter, I will refer back to the New York Times article titled "Confusing Sex and Rape," in which a reporter identifies the problems that readers and critics had with the New York Times' initial coverage of the Jerry Sandusky scandal. Essentially, I will present and defend the idea that a news reporter should remain as objective as possible when reporting a case like this, but they should also be very clear with the language they use to describe the events. For example, if an adult performs a sexual act with a child, it should be referred to as rape because it is statutory rape. If one adult molests another adult, it could be referred to as sexual assault. I will use the Potter box method to support my reasoning on this issue. The Potter box is a 4-step method which aids in the ethical decision-making process. The first of these 4 steps is the fact stage. Here, we will define the issue at hand by identifying all of the facts that we currently know about the situation. Second is the value step. I will discuss what the reporters might value in regards to their jobs or public image. This will give us a perspective from which we may be able to see what may have influenced the reporters during their coverage. During our discussion of the third step, the principle stage, I will use Aristotle's golden mean since it is applicable to this case. Finally, the last step is where we identify all of the loyalties that reporters and newspapers may have to employers, readers, advertisers, and discuss how these may affect their decisions. I'll start by identifying some of the facts about this issue. First, in 2011, Penn State football coach Jerry Sandusky was brought up on 40 charges of sex crimes against young boys. He was accused of sodomizing a 10-year-old boy in a locker room after a summer camp session which he was helping to run. The New York Times was one of the first and most popular news sources to report on this, and many readers criticized the initial reports of the paper for using language that underplayed the severity and brutality of the acts committed by Sandusky. According to the Society of Professional Journalists, it is a news reporter's main duty to seek the truth and report it in an honest and accurate way. So this would mean using appropriate language in order to avoid misleading readers or distorting facts. It wasn't until 4 days after the initial reports that the New York Times began using words like rape to refer to the accusations that Sandusky faced. According to federal law, someone who is underage, especially by 8 years, cannot consent to a sexual encounter. Therefore, an adult being sexually active with someone who is 10 years old would be guilty of rape. The next step in the Potter box process is to identify the values of the case. Journalists' main responsibility is to be truthful when reporting a story. They need to tell the truth without adding in any loaded words or their own opinions. As the main objective of their job, they would be aware of this, and they would certainly value this responsibility. They would also value the public's expectation of them to remain professional in their telling of a story. So perhaps using strong language such as rape may offend some people, and journalists are weary of adding in these types of words. Journalists also value an interesting story and being the first to report on it in as accurate a way as possible. However, being the first to report on something, journalists may miss out on facts that come to light later on in the case, and this would make their story irrelevant. Treating both parties equally is also important when reporting a story, especially when the accused party has not been proven guilty, because everyone certainly has a right to a fair trial. So painting Sandusky as the villain right from the start could be a risky move for the newspaper if it turned out that he was innocent. The New York Times would certainly lose credibility as a news source. However, being that they would value credibility, they might also lose that if they mislabel the events by using language that underplays the severity of the actions that took place, such as the case of the New York Times article, Confusing Sex and Rape. In the principal stage of the Potter box method, we'll take a look at Aristotle's golden mean. The idea of the golden mean states that virtue lies at the midpoint between 2 extremes. Now, how does this idea apply to journalism? It can be argued that responsible reporting lies between skirting around the main point and just being blunt. Truth is the virtue that lies between these 2 extremes. Respecting both the parties involved in the story and the audience of the story by the way you tell it is very important. If you skirt around the main points and leave out details, you may make some of the parties involved happy because you're certainly respecting their privacy, but the audience will probably pick up on this and feel like they are not being told the truth. In contrast, being too blunt may offend both the subjects involved and the audience depending on what kind of language is used. In the case of the New York Times article confusing sex and rape, the audience felt like they were being lied to and not being told the truth because the article used language that was a little bit misleading. In order to describe accusations of rape, the article used words like having sex with or sexually assaulting. The audience felt that in the case of an older man having sex with a younger boy, there is no question that that is considered rape and should be labeled as such. In the last stage of the Potterbox method, we'll take a look at the loyalties that reporters have. When reporting on rape and other sexual assault cases, reporters must deal with their loyalties towards the company they work for and their audience. Loyalties they have toward their company include things like reporters feeling like they need to be one of the first to report on a case that involves non-consensual sex, especially when it involves a high-profile subject and a minor. Being the first to report on this matter establishes credibility for the media outlet and will likely gain a larger audience in the future. The audience also deserves some loyalty from the reporter. Audiences deserve to be told the truth. Reporting truthfully trumps reporting quickly in their eyes. Even if people crave a story immediately, they will be more upset if they find out they are lied to. In the case of the Sandusky trial, they were even upset over the fact that the language used was not strong enough. So clearly, they believe that truthful reporting is more important. In addition, reporters also have a loyalty toward other people that may have been affected by an instance of rape or sexual assault. Being sexually assaulted or raped is a traumatizing experience, and unfortunately many people have gone through it. Reporters must be mindful that some of their audience may have been or may know someone who has been involved in one of these situations. The language they use should always be honest, but never inappropriate. If someone was groped, it can be called sexual assault. If an underage boy is involved with an adult, it should be referred to as rape. There's no need to be exceptionally graphic or specific, but reporters should be clear about what happened and mindful of any victims of these cases. So, in conclusion, the New York Times' initial reporting on the Sandusky case and using language like sexual assault or having sex with a minor could be considered unethical. I believe the newspaper was trying to use less graphic language so they would not offend their readers. They were not purposely dishonest, but instead they were misleading in how they explained the events. Instead, the New York Times should have been upfront with the information they had. They knew Sandusky was at least being accused of raping an underage boy, so there was nothing wrong with stating that from the start. Media outlets in general should not be worried about offending their audience or subjects of the story just by telling the truth. A journalist's job and obligation is to always be truthful, and in this case, the New York Times was not truthful in the way they reported the story.